welcome to this evening's experience on project-based learning, STEAM, and innovative learning spaces. Really, tonight's going to be about active learning and what active learning looks like in the Chappaqua Central District. I'm Culwell-Block, the Director of Technology and Innovation.
I'm Heidi McCarthy, I'm the Director of Special Education Related Services. And I'm Ellen Moskowitz, always a special education teacher, but currently a staff developer.
So, I want to welcome you all here this evening, and we'd also like to give a welcome to Dr. Adam Pease, our upcoming assistant superintendent. And Adam's, one of the big things that we've seen is around space and one-to-one computing. I follow him on Twitter. I'm sort of a little stalker of his. And it is wonderful work that I've seen. So we're thrilled to have you here. So one of the things that we always like to start with, and when we started with our active learning, we started with STEAM, we started with PBL, we looked at Simon Sinek's work. So Simon Sinek, he says start with why. He is someone who has studied the great leaders of our country, Steve Jobs, Martin Luther King, and the Wright brothers. And they all started with, why are we doing what we're doing? Before we look at what are we doing, before we look at how we do it, we need to study why. So if we think about what 21st century learning looks like, why are we going to be creating a 21st century learning environment for our students? And I think about our Sputnik moments, right? We think about why do we need to create technologies? Why do we need to create space? Why do we need to think differently? And as the world around us is changing at an ever rapid pace, faster than we can think of. Another obsession of mine has been the SpaceX that's coming from Elon Musk, and thinking about how we have a corporation that is sending unmanned spaceships out of our atmosphere, and it's fully autonomous. And it has the ability to study things that we've never seen before. And it has the ability to get people into space, right? The next frontier, right? We think that's science fiction, but it's not. And we think about also machine learning, and we think about artificial intelligence, and we are in the age that we need to think about why do we want to use all of this computing power that we have in front of us? Why? So therefore, why do we need to train and think about teaching our students differently, right? We want to think about, as all of this is changing faster, as science fiction becomes our reality, that we need to think about teaching our students about process, and how do we learn, and how do we problem solve, and what are the structures that we have in place in order to teach them how to find content knowledge and not teach them the content knowledge, and as well as how to synthesize that knowledge. We start here with the assembly line, right? That was the moments back then when we thought about technology. Moving on to all of these people creating clean solar energy, all these inventions that we never would have thought of. These are two inventions. One was, I just read an article, I think it was in the New Yorker, about a medical journal. Someone published that people with their Apple Watch and their iPhone can find arrhythmias faster than anybody else can. And it's proven that it has, I know they have this commercial that Apple Watches save lives, and I'm a little skeptical of it sometimes also. But this was a medical journal talking about how this technology literally has shown when people are in pre-arterial defibrillation and all of those things that are, you can understand the whole medical pieces of it. But I knew that it would save our lives. And the other one, an education presenter, Alan November, presented to the school district back in November, ironically, about a toilet bowl in Japan that literally will send data back to your doctor's office every time you use it, right? So, I mean, his jokes were about how your doctor can send you an email that you're not eating enough fiber today, right? But in all seriousness, right, this is something, and this is waste of our students and what's the world going to be like 10, 15, 20 years from now, and what are the inventions that they're going to create. We want to have our students thinking about creating these inventions. So we don't only want our students graduating from Horace Greeley with the ability to do math problems and the ability to write great essays, but we want them to think. We want them to be able to create, and we want them to have processes that they're able to work through and create the next generation of whatever these machines are that we haven't planned out yet. And one of the big things, our school district has been doing this for years. We have a board question: how can the district ensure that all students think deeply, support their thinking, apply problem-solving skills, and actively participate in their learning as they acquire content knowledge? So this is a statement that we've started years ago, and we're talking about modern learning today. And we're at the forefront of all of this, and we are thinking about now having visions about students engaging in experiences that involve meaningful inquiry, action, imagination, invention, interaction, hypothesizing, and personal reflection. And you're in a space today that supports that type of learning. So we are trying to create spaces that are really flexible, that are super flexible. Ellen and I came in here, this space was in a horseshoe, because there was a teacher before us who was doing more of a seminar and some debriefing with students. And we're tonight going to be doing more activity games. So we quickly, took us maybe 7 minutes, get our everything in gear, move our desks, move our chairs, to create it so that we're in more of an activity space. And that's what tonight's going to be about. Another vision, we want students to work cooperatively towards a common goal, exchange ideas, and rely on one another to create product or arrive at a solution that cannot be achieved by an individual. And you're going to try that out tonight. You've got gumdrops and toothpicks here, and you're going to create a bridge. And we're going to see how the group of you at that table going through a design process, how we achieve that. So these are important things, and these are the things that we really are rooting all of our work in.
Full disclosure, I'm a little under the weather, so I hope that you can hear me. So when we're talking about this evening, we're talking about all students. So we're talking about a large range, diverse learners, and how can we ensure that all learners are benefiting from the instruction in our spaces. And a lot of the work that we're doing is really rooted in universal design for learning, which is an educational framework. And it guides the development of flexible learning environments like what we have here that can accommodate the individual learning differences of all students. So we have a little video that we'll show you that you can listen to, and then we'll speak to it a little bit more.
Over the past few years, a revolution in architectural design has made streetscapes and buildings more accessible to everyone. Now, a revolutionary approach called Universal Design for Learning is also changing how we think about education. This educational approach was pioneered by David Rose and his colleagues at the Center for Applied Special Technology. Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. What is it? It's a way of addressing the different learning needs of students right from the start, thinking about the diversity of learners, and reducing barriers to learning. Diversity could include differences in background knowledge and experience, learning preferences, learning strengths and abilities, personal interests, and levels of engagement. UDL means identifying potential barriers within the learning environment so they can be reduced or eliminated. The result? Increased accessibility, more success for more students. Many Alberta schools are using Universal Design for Learning principles to create more learner-centered and inclusive learning environments. A UDL approach benefits all students, including students with disabilities. It helps blur the line between regular education and special education. Universal Design for Learning is based on 3 main principles: multiple means of representation, giving learners different ways to acquire information and knowledge. Multiple means of action and expression, giving learners different ways to demonstrate what they know. And multiple means of engagement, tapping into learners' different interests, challenging them appropriately, and motivating them to learn. The UDL principles rely on the use of technology to ensure learning resources and environments are accessible and engaging for all students. Universal Design for Learning is a design intervention. It is about curriculum design, instructional design, and access to flexible learning resources. A truly UDL learning environment depends on many factors: flexible instructional practices, learner-centered curriculum, availability of digital learning resources, and support from school leaders. Understanding UDL can help school leaders talk about inclusion, technology, and student success with students, staff, families, and community partners. The UDL framework can help learning coaches help teachers better understand the diverse learning needs of their students. The principles of UDL can also help inform future curriculum development to ensure learner outcomes, resources, and assessments better meet the needs of a wider range of students. A universal design for learning approach benefits all students. It can increase student engagement, help teachers to better support each and every student in their classroom, and enhance academic success. For more information on supporting every student, visit the Alberta Education website.
So project-based learning lends itself beautifully to the framework of UDL. And so as we speak tonight about our spaces, and as we speak tonight about PBL and the work that we're doing with students, you'll see that it's all fitting in beautifully. The work that we've done around inclusion, the work we've done around our learning spaces and continue to do, you'll see how it all fits together very nicely. So these were the three that they were speaking of before in a different order. They've actually just moved engagement to the front as the first because it's important to ensure that our students are engaged in their learning first before the other two components. The representation is how we are representing the work to our students so that all of our students can access it at their different levels and their different learning styles and their different interests. And then the action and expression is how they're going to express to us and relate to us that they've understood the content. And so when you're working in an environment that allows for greater flexibility, you can have students presenting their learning to you in very different ways. And certainly with the use of technology, that lends itself even further.
So one of the things, the research I've done around math and problem solving in education, and PBL also dovetails nicely with that. And the research shows that when we think about students who are in problem-solving modes, or if they're in active modes of learning, where they're relying on their comprehension as well as auditory, as well as visual processing, you're activating this whole center part of the brain. And you're activating the connections between the various parts of the brain. And you're actually making new neural pathways between your long-term memory, your short-term memory, and the planning and the executive functioning part of your brain, which really helps students think differently and think about the work that they're doing and help to retain that knowledge. And there's all sorts of studies that show that rather than giving students short, quick bursts of math problems, giving them longer-term problem-solving process problems that include that mathematics, that they're more likely to retain that math and they're more likely to be able to apply that into new novel situations. And that's the same exact work that we're doing with project and problem-based learning. So you might see a PBL in a classroom that might last 45 minutes, like we're going to do today. It's going to be around learning about different bridges And you might see, we're trying to get you to learn about specific types of bridges. And you're going to be able, this research will show us that you're going to be able to retain that more than had I just given you a text to read around different types of bridges, right? So that's one thing. There might be some longer term PBLs where kids are creating prototypes of things like the toilet bowl that I showed earlier, where they might be creating what is a tiny house project between an art and a tech teacher. And those really start to get students to activate their excitement, activate their brain, and really be able to work through projects. And we have kids that come back that ask questions from our Tiny House project about specific engineering concepts. And they are able to articulate structure better than anyone that I've ever seen. Just a piece of our journey and how we got to where we are today. So we started on this journey probably before 2013, but with the creation of the ILET and our Innovation Fellows, there was a small group of high school teachers that started studying project and problem-based learning. We then followed that up with academia in the summer, which gave us opportunities to do some research with students and led students to really mock up some of the ideas that we've been working on in a longer period of time. In 2014, we started really studying, okay, well, we've got PBL. Let's now see how we can apply that to STEAM. And we built our STEAM collaborative group of 42 teachers that have been studying what STEAM curriculum looks like in our school district. We had our next iteration of academic camps, our writers camps, our STEAM camps at that point, and our we had 2 writers camps that year. And then we opened the Bell Learning Labs. So that was expanding a lot of the ideas that we learned with our high school innovation fellows into our middle school. In 2015, we then said, okay, how do we start thinking about what the role technology plays in all of this? And we've got a group of teachers studying technology, and as well as our collaborative teaching fellows, which are special education and regular education teachers looking at learning in new ways. And then launching our elementary makerspaces, which is now how do we take all of what we've done in the high school and our middle school and start playing with these ideas in elementary school. 2016, we have the wonderful support of our community for the Innovative Spaces Fund that we're starting to build our spaces. 2 floors below us now is a STEAM lab that's being built. And at our 3 elementary schools, the Global Learning Centers and makerspaces are currently being built. And we are going to begin building a STEAM building at our high school, the Global Learning Center at our high school, and reframing our L building, classroom building into small learning communities. So these are all spaces where students are going to get opportunities to work in flexible and technological spaces where they can collaborate with each other more easily and more flexibly than in a standard classroom. And then if we look at, I think, talked about 2017, and right now, knowing that we're opening these spaces, we have teachers that are studying what type of learning is going to happen in these spaces. So the curriculum and the education coming first before the spaces. So you guys are in this space. There was a clamoring need in 7 Bridges for a flexible learning space. It was happening in other buildings. Teachers were saying, we need something that we can move things around. And then we were able to just re-outfit the space to be where we are today. So if you walk around our schools, you'll see lots of classrooms that have new furniture. You'll see new spaces that are built. And it's really transforming the way education happens in our schools. You'll see students that are grabbing devices just right over here readily to utilize them as needed. It really is just creating this agile atmosphere for learning that really allows students to learn in much better ways than sitting in rows and reading books and listening to boring lectures, mostly probably from the beginning of my career. So along the way, we created the Chappaqua Central School District design process. This is a process that came from an amalgamation of lots of different design processes that we found. We didn't find one that we liked that really fit the needs of everything that we just talked about. But it really falls into 3 phases: a pre-production phase, a production phase, and a post-production phase. So we structure a lot of our work into this red, yellow, and blue components. also notice that feedback is provided throughout the process. And that can happen from teachers, it can happen from peers, it can happen from anybody over the course of that process. It's also cyclical, because we know that in life, we might in pre-production, where we're setting our goals and exploring and deciding and prototyping something, we might decide it's not going to work, right? So we might go iterate over the pre-production cycle again. Or we build something and we see that it's not going to whatever our project might be, and we want to build it again, right? And that's important. And iteration and failure is an important part of all of this work, because that's how we all learn. So that's why we have this completely iterative process. We're going to go through before we get there. And I want to point out is that the exercise we're going to go through, we color code our processes you have in front of you so that it is, we're going to do a pre-production, which is our red portion of our workbooks, a production, which is going to be the yellow portion of our workbooks, and then a post-production reflection, which is going to be the post-production piece of it. I see Mary's going to hand that word so that everybody has an idea. So we try and make everything, and as Heidi talked about the UDL process, we try to make everything as systemic as possible so that everybody has access to the work that we're doing, and everybody can make decisions, and everybody can set goals for themselves. And this has been one of, I think, the most salient things that I've seen happen when we see groups of students either go through this process, either in a class period, in a week, over the course of a month.
So those of you that know me from being in the classroom know that I get really excited when we can find ways to meet the needs of all of our students. That is what drove me to become a special ed teacher, and that is what still empowers me in this new role. And with this work, between the integration of technology and instructional design that's framed around projects, we have the ability to meet the needs of all of our students based on what they're interested in. So that's the fabulous thing about PBL, is that it allows flexibility for students with niche interests, with interesting passions, with a really interesting way to see the world and to see a problem and make sense of what they're learning, to share that. No longer is writing an essay the only way that you can express your understanding. No longer is filling out note cards at what I had to do in my 7th grade social studies class. Take notes at the end of every chapter and hand that in order to get any chance of getting an A in the class. I had to note card the entire chapter. No longer is that the way that all students must learn. And so that's what's really exciting about this work, is that PBL really highlights the diversity. And in the slides that Heidi was showing you, it talked about engagement, student representation, and student expression. I happened to be working in a 3rd grade classroom, I think it was 2 days ago, and I was teaching the class, because part of my role is instructional technology. I was teaching the class about creating stop-motion animation. And that was kind of the gist of what I was going in for. I had no idea what was going to come out of that session, so I'm just going to show you this really quick video, but it is stop-motion, so it goes fast. And the previous day, this 3rd grade classroom teacher was sharing with her students, talking to them about and teaching them about equivalent fractions, which is a very hard concept for 3rd graders to understand, right? Especially right out of the gate. And I was working with this student who happens to be a student with diverse learning needs. And I actually wasn't even working with it. He came over to me and said, "Oh my gosh, I have an idea." And I'm like, "What's your idea?" He's like, "I get fractions now." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Come and help me." So we brought over, he was like, "I need something I could cut." So we brought over straws, and he had his iPad and the stop motion app, and I'll show you how he showed his teacher that he understood equivalent fractions. So again, it goes quickly, so. Now he wanted to go backwards. Oh wait, this is the best part.
It should be like, there's the learning right there.
That's it, right? That kid, if he had to do it with a pencil and paper, would have never been able to show that he knew that you get 1/6 from 1/3, which you got from a whole. And he would have never been able to show that you do that by folding and cutting a straw in half and into pieces. That's PBL, that's UDL, and that's the work that we're doing with our students. And that's thanks to our Director of Technology and CSF. That's the work we can do with our technology, right? That's the opportunities that now are presented, that are now possible with our students and in our classrooms. So we're focusing on what can students do and how can they represent their understanding, rather than you have to do it one way. So, can I do it by pressing the arrow?
You should click on the slideshow first.
Okay, sorry.
Into a YouTube video.
Tech coach, I can't mess with slides. So this slide really shows about what traditional curriculum is and has been, and what curriculum is and will be, continue to grow into in our PBL units. And this isn't to say that one is absent of the other. There are going to be times where our classrooms are going to have traditional, instruction, and there are times that our classrooms are going to engage in PBL. There are decisions that are going to be made based on what students need to know and how they need to learn it. But the exciting thing about PBL is that it's so flexible. So you have students that need to move, that need to be engaged with more than just one voice in the front of the room, that can watch a video, that can make a video, that can get up and interview teachers and students around the school to find data to prove their thinking that they're trying to get to answer the question that they had at the beginning of the period. It's for students that struggle with, organization, and students that struggle with the ability to keep everything in track. PBL allows for the teacher to come away from the front of the room and push up next to your child. It allows the teacher to not be the only one delivering information, so that she or he, can sit next to your child and say, hey, what's a strategy that we can use to help organize your materials, because you've got a lot going on here, right? So there's opportunities for us to, as teachers, to push up to groups of students and say, it looks like you're having a conflict. What do we need to do here? And there's opportunities for direct instruction to all of those people. Where as a teacher, you're standing in front of the room, your only job is delivering the instruction. And you do your best to get to the other pieces. PBL allows for the flexibility of teachers sitting side by side with children and guiding their learning. So that's what's really exciting about PBL.
I don't know if you want questions at the end or...
Yeah, we'll a whole bunch of questions. Thank you, though. So projects are more flexible, they're interest-based, they embed movement and multimedia, and there's a less strain on working. Remember, talking about Miss Colton, she plagues me in my dreams. We had to memorize all the dates of all the battles of the American Revolution. I can't tell you one of them, right? No longer is our education really about memorizing the dates of the American Revolution, because I could look it up in the computer I carry in my pocket, right? It's about diving deeply into the causes of the American Revolution and the outcomes, and are we still in a revolution? That's what PBL is. And that's the essential questions and the guided questions that our students are going to be able to dive into at their own level and at their own interest. And some kids are going to be reading chapters and chapters of books to find this, and other kids are going to be watching videos after videos, and some kids are going to be making a video. So there's so many different entry points, there's so many different ways for our students to get this information, and there's so many different ways for our students to show you, the greater world, the teachers, that they get it. So that's why I get really jazzed about PBL. I'm going to show you one of our spaces in one of our schools. This is, because Dr. Fitzgerald is here, I chose Bell, the Bell space that should be starting to be constructed this summer. And this is the innovative space. And I just want to show you what I think is really interesting about this space. Is if you picture the size of this space, it's about 6 classrooms and a hallway. So it's a pretty large space, and it's actually on the second floor, kind of near the art rings in the front of the building, if you don't know. But what's exciting is that, and these are all just drawings, right? That I don't exactly know what the furniture looks like and how pretty it's going to be when it's all set up. But all of it is flexible, all of it is movable, all of it allows for students to work in different configurations. You could work alone, you could work collaboratively, you could pull desks apart, you can move things around the space. You could have kids that are building something with a drill press and a laser cutter in your fabrication shop, and groups that are brainstorming in your fabrication lab and doing some prototype work, while other groups are, and probably not at all the same time, just giving you the possibilities, presenting over here and practicing their presentation and communication skills and getting feedback from their classmates. While you have other kids in our design lab and other kids in our application lab and teachers pushing in and supporting the learning for all of these spaces. And again, it's not going to be full all periods, all day, every day. There's not going to be 6 classrooms worth of children in here. But there will be students moving in and out and flowing between all these spaces so that they can find the way to best express their ideas so that they can be the next Elon Musk. So they can start tinkering with the idea of I can change the world. This is another kind of schematic of the Bell space. Production work area, production space, reflective lounge. Never had a lounge when I was in middle school. We're going to move from this into our building, hands-on building. So Josh is going to walk us through what will be, and has been, we've done similar things with some of our students, some hands-on short PBLs, where they really get to understand the concepts.
Josh, before you do that, I just want to mention that after you do the work and experience what your children experience, then we're going to have an opportunity to have our experts here speak to you, and we've anticipated some of the questions that you may have, so we're hoping to hit on them. We've got Dr. Fitzgerald, we have Sarah Alley here who's representing elementary, Jess Marchetti is one of our staff developers, we have Amy Kaiser here who's representing the high school. So if you have your questions, if you've got burning questions, we also have Post-its in the middle of the table if you want to write them down, but we will have time afterwards for our educators to speak to you and answer some of the questions that you anticipate you might have after all of this.
Great, so it's time for the hands-on activity. These 3. So everybody should have a little handy-dandy design workbook. This is how we're going to go through the work here. I got to geek out on bridges. Anybody that's looked over the past 3 days has heard a lot about types of bridges and how bridges suspend and are held up and which ones are valid and which ones aren't. So picture this. The year is 2079. And the cable-stayed Tappan Zee Bridge is falling. So first one lasted 50 years. That's about 50 years from now. Engineers have determined, forgetting about that previous bridge that was falling, that they were truss Tappan Zee Bridge, the old one, that a truss bridge would be most effective bridge to build. So your team, that you're all sitting in groups, you are all going to prototype a bridge. There are 2 books, and you're going to build a bridge that goes across the books, and the span should be the length of one 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So that's the basics of what you're going to use. And you are going to use toothpicks and gumdrops. Please don't eat the gumdrops. I got them from Amazon, and they came in a bag with writing on it that was not something that I would want to ingest. But I will tell you this, speaking of truss is the type of bridge that you have. That's that erector set style bridge. The cantilever piece is the fact that it's suspended by two posts in the middle here, right? So here you have something here that's a suspended span and two cantilever arms from there. The new Tappan Zee Bridge is a cable stayed bridge, was that it has two posts and there are cables that tie the roadway and it's suspended up there. So just so you know what two different types of bridges are. And then the suspension, our classic suspension bridge that we have here as well. So again, a truss bridge, all that really means is that it's got some beams that we're going to use our toothpicks for, and we've got our little pins or the pieces there that you're going to use the gumdrops for. So I'm going to take you through the design workbook. And we are going to go through our entire design process. We're going to start with the pre-production, where you're all going to set goals for yourself. And then you're going to do some sketching quickly. And just so you know that that is going to be about a 8 to 10 minutes of our process. The next piece is going to be the production, where we do production logistics, and then you start to do your build. And then afterwards, we'll probably do a debrief, either a whole group, and you just writing something down in there. So I'm going to take you through what piece by piece, what this looks like. So before we start, the first box is individual. You are all going to, in your own words, state the objective of the project and set an individual goal for yourself, right? And for your group. You know, maybe your goal is going to be, I want to build a bridge that makes it across the ravine. Maybe your goal is that I want to work with my group mates, or I want to do work on some listening, or work on some problem solving. I want to, whatever that goal is for you, spend a minute writing down what it be. I want to build a bridge that holds lots of weight on top of it. Think about what a goal is for you as you're doing that. I'll time you, I'll give everybody a minute to do just a little bit of writing. Okay. Step 2 in all of this is everybody loves to start playing with materials and starts to build it. So here's your next step of all of this. In part 2, I'm going to give everybody 4 minutes to play with the toothpicks and gumdrops that are at your table. Here is the thing. You are not allowed to start building, right? You are to identify what are the strengths of the materials, what are the weaknesses of the materials, and what are the design options are possible with the materials that you had not considered before you started playing with these objects. So I do see some bridges suspended across. I see some bridges suspended across books. I see some people who. So I want to point out some of the pieces of this project that I noticed as I was walking around. So the first thing is I took everybody through a design process. The goal of this wasn't so that you started building right away. And that's really the difference between, I think, playing with toys and going through a design process, right? And play is hugely important in student development and child development, but going through a design process really gets us to think about the components of what we're doing. So there were some unintended coachings that I happened. So Mary Ford said, I wanted to create right triangles, and I was able to say to her, you have toothpicks of equal length. Is it going to be possible for you to create a right triangle out of that? I didn't intend for that lesson to happen right there, but it was a perfect teachable moment, right? And I also saw David said, I'm going to just start fabricating. I'm going to start putting gumdrops on the end of toothpicks. I'm just going to start putting them together before we even started. So there was a job that someone can do over the course of this. I saw conversations. I saw people thinking about structure. I saw lots of different things happen that are not just about the engineering principles, but also about the collaboration principles. There was no expectant place that people would wind up at the end of this. Had I been teaching, I probably would have had a clipboard with me and just taking notes about what all of you were doing, so that afterwards I could reflect back and say, okay, what are the things that everybody was required to know at the end of this lesson, and what are the things that were really cool that people found out, so that I can know, okay, who do I need to co-coach into next time, and what skills do I need to teach in the next set of projects that we're doing to make sure that everybody got the same way. What I also loved, one group's goal was all about the design principle and the aesthetics of it. They separated their gumdrops into different colors. And I also wanted to kudos to that group for attempting to build a suspension bridge out of gumdrops and toothpicks, which I really. There was another group of
And they assign roles.
right, and they assign roles. Another group I saw was trying to build the tallest structure possible, and I,
That wasn't the goal, though.
that was not the goal. What was the goal?
You wanted that, never need to. I want to.
You wanted
What's the goal of the vacancy?
right?
We all just have to work separately, then we just have to.
So, and this group said, we're going to try and do the most simplest one, which is, let's see if just a base gets across. What's that going to do? So I probably would talk about SAT, and I would talk about structures of bridges at this point. So again, grade, this might be a grade either, depending on grade level, this might be the lesson, right? This might be the entry event into an engineering unit. Or this might be even an entry event into a math unit around strong structures and geometry. So like I see around your room, some of you have really strong triangles that you built. What's the strongest structure in the world, right? Would be a triangular prism. So I see some of that happening. That's at the top of you have a square-based prism. So we might then keep these in our classroom as we talk about geometry and geometric shapes and the strengths of those shapes. So much that can come out of this from here that I think it's really just a good thing for something as simple, and I'm sure we've all done gumdrop and toothpick activities, but the design process on top of it really makes, really is where the learning happens. And again, I think my goal is if you leave here knowing what a truss bridge is, then that was my goal for the evening here, right? From here. So I really appreciated all of the learning that happened in these groups. I really appreciated people trying. I really appreciated the failure that I saw. And I really appreciated the mindset that everybody came through. So we are going to move on to our panel now. And that Mary is going to
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Mary Ford. I'm the interim assistant superintendent for curriculum. And I'll be asking our panel members many of the questions that we've been hearing from the community, so hopefully we'll answer some of the questions that you have this evening. So the first question is, how does PBL maximize educational opportunities for all students, including those with learning needs?
I think over the past hour and a half now, we've heard a lot already about how PBL can maximize opportunities for students in terms of its flexibility, in terms of student engagement, in terms of different forms of representation, expression, engagement, and that all came up with the UDL piece too. But I think one of the biggest pieces, and I think at least I just saw this in the bridge building activity, is that in PBL you have a chance as a student or as a learner to practice and engage in the learning during class. So like instead of class time being 40 minutes or 80 minutes of absorbing information and then having to practice things at home, you have a chance to actually practice and work and try things out and have successes and have failures while you're in the classroom with the support of 25 other students, let's say, or 1 or 2 teachers, and with many more resources at that point, even technological resources, to engage in the learning in a safe way, instead of having to wait until you go home. And then at home you might realize, oh, I missed that part, or wish I asked that question, or I want to check in with this person about that. You have an opportunity to do it in class when everyone's around you, And then if you want to extend the learning when you're home, there's that chance too. But I think it's really helpful to have time in the classroom environment to practice and to develop those skills. And I noticed from my group, I mean, we definitely got a little bit of a slower start because we were playing with the materials and trying to figure out our plan. But even when Josh was maybe when you were kind of summarizing and talking at the end, I think it said a lot that we kept going and we wanted to keep building our bridge and trying things out and making adjustments. Not because anyone told us we had to, but just because at that point we had gotten to that place where we wanted to keep going. And I think PBL also offers students that opportunity to say we don't want to finish or learn at the same time or get to the same place in the same amount of time, but that there's room for people to get there in different places at different times.
Moving to the next question. How are groups formed for PBL projects and how are group project grading? Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yes.
The last half. How are groups formed for PBL and how are group project grading?
I'll try that. Being an English teacher in the high school, grades probably have the most impact in the high school, I'd say. First, to talk a little bit about the groups, I just wanted to start by answering a question that came up at my table. The question is, are kids working in groups all the time, all day long? And that's a very understandable question. And the answer is no, that really the flexible seating should be an example of how they are always on the move. There's a balance of individual work, there's pair work at some times, group work for certain projects. So it's kind of ever shifting. The answer to how they are formed would be very thoughtfully in that the benefit of this type of UDL and PBL learning is we get to know our students at a much more individual level than we would in a traditional classroom. So I'm able to formulate groups based on all the knowledge I have of each individual student, not just the skills they bring, their personalities, their interests. Most of the time, if we have a project that does involve a group that will be working together for any extended period of time, I will kind of give a pre-assessment or pre-survey, or I'll ask the kids questions about that I know are going to impact the work ahead to try to gauge which groups would work well together. Usually they have a similar vision for what they'd like to achieve. They have a similar style of work. So it's always changing, but it's always kind of based on the knowledge that we have of the students. And the more we get to know them, work with them, the better that is formed. I'll just answer the grading question. Another question that came up at our table, I can speak for how it works in English. The other huge shift that's a huge benefit is that assessments are very different. It is no longer the case where a student has to sit and write an on-demand essay that I take and mark with a red pen and stick a grade on it after. It's all about growth and receiving feedback. So it's a continual loop where students are giving feedback to each other, receiving feedback from me, having an opportunity to revise and enhance their work and respond to the feedback. We have rubrics and standards where they're able to evaluate how they're doing and continue to work on their areas of weakness. And then finally, I think for me, the biggest shift that I have found the most benefited is there's always a reflective aspect after the work is completed, where students not only have an opportunity to show their growth in the skills, but they have an opportunity to reflect on their learning process, what aspects of this were helpful, what came easily, what was more challenging for you, what questions are you left with, where do you think this takes you next? All of that is built into assessment, and all of that factors into grade, so it's a very different student-centered experience, I'd say. There's a follow-up question. I don't know, Mary, if you want to take that now or if you want to wait.
I have a follow-up. So to that question,
from a parent of a student with learning differences. And I think there was, and it's not, I've heard it a couple times from a couple parents. There's a real fear there that nobody's going to want to work with my child, or, they're not going to be able to keep up and it's going to pull down, the group project's grade. And so I think, can you address how students who might not be able to contribute as much as some other students, at different levels, especially special needs students and students with learning differences, how would you have me allay those fears for that parent?
I think I certainly understand. I work in the integrated co-teaching classroom. In English, I work with a special education teacher. I've been doing that for 9 or 10 years. Really, the collaborative teaching model, the cooperative group work model, is the most successful for students at all ability levels. And we do, when my co-teacher and I think about groups, as I said before, we do consider personalities, we consider partnerships, we talk and work on building relationships between students in order to be proactive about fears like that. If we have some students who are more reticent or perhaps less confident, it's a lot of work that is done to help that student with confidence, with seeing his or her own strengths, with building relationships with other students in the class, so that when they're in those particular circumstances where there is one group project and the student may fear that he or she might not be able to contribute as much, that certainly it is all factored into the work. And one of the biggest learning experiences I've had is from Peter Johnston, who has come and worked with us and taught us the importance of the language that we teach students how to work together. And it's really all about the facilitation of the group work and the way we are able to coach our students and able to ask them questions to make them feel comfortable and confident to work together.
There's also work done with the Gen Ed students in terms of helping them learn to appreciate learning differences. And can you talk a little bit about that specifically?
Yeah, I just want to be able to kind of address that into some of our questions. I was just going to ask, maybe kind of lining up your question with our next question, but also thinking about elementary, because I'm thinking that what happens at the high school, we're setting the groundwork at the elementary level. So Sarah, maybe you could speak a little bit about how we start to build that, and then thinking about exactly what the general education versus special education teacher roles are and how we work together to make sure that all students are served well.
Well, I think whenever I teach second grade, so whenever I'm thinking about moving my kids together, my general education students, my special education students, I do think about what are they all bringing to the group. I do, as I get to know my students better, everybody's bringing a strength, but I also think about the group dynamics. Who are the leaders going to be? Who are the children who are going to need to be supported a little differently? And I think that it's a culture in my room that we're all bringing something. We're all working together. I think when I think about some of the modifications, I think whenever I'm thinking about any kind of a PBL project, whether it's a 45-minute lesson or it's a 1-week project, the first thing I think about is how can I make it accessible for all of my students. And sometimes the modifications that I can make are definitely on the front end of a project. I know, for example, that I've got a reader who is significantly lower than the rest of the population. So I can very quickly find technology that a part of the PBL project is they need to be able to read something. I have technology that is going to allow something to be read for them. So they are instantly in group with the same background information, but they're just accessing it a little differently. There are some fantastic websites that I can get the same book title, but one is on a level perhaps G, let's say, the other is printed at a level M. So different reading levels, but now I've instantly equalized my two learners. They're getting the same information in their nonfiction text, perhaps, that's going to help make their PBL project move forward. But I am looking at it so that everybody is coming in knowing that I need to put modifications in place ahead of time. There are times, though, what I find is that as we're in the middle of something that might be taking a little bit longer, that the modifications, I see that I need to do them as we're inside the project.
Modifications.
Well, absolutely. And I think that that's the flexibility of PBL learning, is that I don't have to stick to the script that I came up with on day one. I'm allowed to get into it. And just like you guys did, there was trial and error. You figured that your bridge was saggy in the middle. Well, sometimes I realize that my project has a sag in the middle. And I can figure out, okay, how do I need to modify? Something that was really successful for me this year is I gave if we were in nonfiction learning teams, I call my kids, they put them in learning teams instead of groups. I don't know, it feels very grown up for the little guys. And I said, you are in your learning team, you as a group need to figure out how you want to present this information to the rest of the class. I'm going to teach you some technology, I'm going to teach you some different platforms. But at the end, as you're collecting your notes and you're learning and you're figuring out this topic, how are you going to present it to the class? And at the end, we realized that one little guy who is in the autism spectrum. We realized that the group wanted to do an oral presentation with Google Slides. They wanted to be up. And we realized, okay, let's write him a social story. So we helped him do that. We gave him a little practice. His passion was the vocabulary words. So his slide was the vocabulary words. They were highlighted. He spoke to it. And I realized that he had a vital component. They decided that vocabulary needed to be at the end because that was the glossary. So his piece of the presentation was seamless. It met his IEP goals, eye contact, facing the audience, speaking clearly, clarity of speech. The rest of the group helped him decide where his slide should be. It felt effortless. Yet the kids who were really able to write multiple paragraphs or bring in video, that fit their slide, his slide fit his slide, but it was a very cohesive group presentation. I think that another piece in my classroom is my furniture is on wheels. So the kids can pick up the locks, move the furniture around, and if they need to be in a group facing one another, if they need to be pulled apart to the side, if they need to be in a partner, there's a lot of that flexibility. We've now we're not one-to-one devices, but we should have 25 that I share with another class. So there's the ability for the children who, I need to see a picture of something. I can walk out, get the laptop, bring it back. It now becomes part of the group. So I think that.
So it's helping the inclusivity in your classroom, not hindering it.
Oh, I think it supports it tremendously. Yes. And I think,
I'm sorry.
But no, I was going to say, and I think that, as we said, it's not, my whole day is not PBL. It can't be. But there are more and more times when I'm doing projects like your bridge building, when I'm doing projects to launch a unit, or I'm doing projects that are, enhancing my nonfiction, perhaps. But one thing that I would do with a bridge building, if I did a project like that with my students, one of the most important things that we can do is have them take a tour, see what was being built, and then have a reflection and a discussion. And then I usually let them do it a second time, because there's so much value in the trial and error that you go through the first time, and then the surveying and seeing what everybody's doing, and then giving you an opportunity to work again.
We would have benefited from another time around. I was just going to add on to that, because you're asking about the special education teacher versus the general education teacher, and just listening. It seems like this is promoting collaboration amongst the adults in the organization as well as the students. And Ellen, I was wondering if you had a perspective on that, thinking about what you noticed in terms of teachers working together, because you can imagine what Sarah's describing or what Amy described. There's an awful lot of co-planning and thinking through and knowing your students really well in order to do that.
Yeah, and that happens. It was an unexpected benefit of this initiative is that, so you work with a teacher like Sarah Alley, and she's supported with her classroom is supported with a special education teacher who's also phenomenal, and they're planning this, nonfiction learning team project. I wanted to get the title right. And then, by chance, you have these two teachers that are now sitting at the lunch table talking to the other second grade teachers and say, hey, I was just doing this, and I was trying this out. And so now you have this really differentiated, really inclusive project that started as a seed idea and has blossomed into other classrooms. And so you have other classroom teachers that are embracing the opportunity to experiment with PBL, to be supported by their colleagues, and at the same time having, whether it's the special teacher that's in the room or me as the coach, coming in and say, how are we making this accessible to all of our students? And that's what happens. And I mean, second grade at Grapplet is a perfect example of how this has spread like wildfire through the grade level.
I have a follow-up question. I'm sorry, just real quickly. It's wonderful that teachers talk about stuff like that over the lunch table and stuff, but I would assume that there's a ton of professional development as well, because people this only works if the faculty are, of course.
Right. So we have a few questions. We'll get back on track, and then if there's anything we didn't cover, then just let us know and we'll follow up on that. So the next question is just about the learning spaces and how they enhance this type of learning.
So I'll take that one on. And much I think of what I say, it probably is a bit of a crosswalk across areas that have already been discussed and a bit of trespass at times. But with that said, I mean, we talk about the flexibility of these models. And an interesting exercise is to think back to your own time at school and the cube that many of us were probably in, with the one wall with the windows, the other one with the door, the very presentational tutorial style of the teacher, often rows, perhaps there were a few groupings. It was very much a tutorial experience. And also to think about the student, and maybe this was your own experience, who might be sitting next to the most talkative boy in the room, or behind the tallest girl in the class, or as in my case, next to a student who hadn't yet understood the concept of personal hygiene. And I will share that though because it was so distracting to the learning at the time. So with that said though, in terms of thinking of space, there is quite a bit of research to show that how we configure and how we move students in learning spaces does have an impact. Some research would show that placing kids in semicircles or placing them in circles helps to generate a lot more questions than traditional squares or even square tables. Other research will talk about using activity to determine the configuration, not vice versa. So interesting ways of thinking about that. It is a pedagogy-first approach, and you're kind of hearing that here tonight. So some of the questions, the options become diagnostic. So you walk around, you do some recording. So the worry about a student who might be feeling excluded or not included, the teacher would be observing for that sort of an experience and adjusting. You can adjust the pace. You might not start out in a setting where you're going to do bridges. You might do something much more on a smaller scale to build up the sort of resilience of the kids until you get into more complex settings. There's a language around all this space now. If you know, this isn't new. This is maybe the work of maybe 20 years in some third-level institutions and universities. So you'll even hear the language that talk about things like cabaret style, or campfire style, or cafe style, and other ones like Socratic or forum. So that language, when something gets a language, it's got to, has a little energy and momentum. Thinking about the space at Bell as an example, those would be 4 classrooms really brought into a much larger space. So we could almost bring a team in there, something that was never possible in the past. And the potential with something like that in such a large space is huge. We didn't get to talk about, but also the whole technology piece and the ability to use movable devices and displays and personal devices all gets scaled up. And lastly, someone mentioned earlier, you can, if you haven't already, you can visit scaled down versions of this space by visiting classrooms in various schools. So I can speak to Belle again, and we've been experimenting with this for a long time now. And this is a great opportunity to scale up from what we learned about using it in a classroom setting. The belief is, we spend a lot of time trying to change people, but maybe here we change the environment, and people will come along with that. So the environment as an agent of change, and I've seen that. I've seen that at the school. I've seen that in terms of how people plan, how people collaborate, how people provide feedback and assess. And I do believe a lot of that was driven by the changing of the space. Of course, when you get the nexus of the teacher's desire and capacity, and someone was asking that question with that, it's a very powerful combination. It does provide opportunities for small group instruction, larger group instruction. In terms of kids who might be a little slower paced, the idea of peers working together in groups may free up the teacher to work in a more one-to-one or one-to-two opportunity to catch them up and move them along. So that's a possibility that is there as well. Lots written about activity and students just actively engaged, literally being actively engaged in movement. It would be a rare lesson you'd see at a school now where there are some elements of that, and now this would be by default the experience of the child in the space. Ellen showed two of what was a 3-slide, I think the term is deck, right? Is that what they say? It's a language for everything, right? But the one that we were interested in is the one that we showed, I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble getting it, where in that space, it also, and we were talking about, we're going to do this as a simulation, as sort of before we get to the space with the staff, but we've also identified the sorts of things that can go on in the various areas. So we talk about things like mobile learning, peer-to-peer collaboration, movement-based learning, storytelling, one-to-one learning, I'm just going around in a circle here, distance learning, performance-based learning, mobile learning. So again, that's all mapped out in these spaces as to what you would do in this particular area. So lastly, the Bell Learning Lab is in its 5th, going into its 6th year. That was our first toe in the water around experimenting in space. I was there with a group of kids today, and they still run to that space all these years later. So that tells me something. And they've also become a lot more, those who were maybe in the 6th or 7th, after they've used it, they're less bouncing around on the chairs as you might have had in the first initial entrance, and more thinking about purpose. And they actually have started to take control of moving furniture as well. And so that's very hopeful and very optimistic. And if that's an example of what's ahead at all schools and scaled up in the way we're planning, it's going to be very exciting.
So the next question is about roles. Teacher and student roles change in this PBL environment. So what are the new teacher roles? What do student roles look like? And how are these new responsibilities taught to students?
I'm excited to answer this one because I've made so many changes in the past 3 years, mostly because of my work in the Teacher Action Research Program, which I'm very grateful for. My role as a teacher is to create engaging, active learning experiences for my students that will target skills and target content and keep them actively reading, writing, thinking every day, from the minute they walk in to the minute they leave. It's a creative challenge because I love to kind of come up with a puzzle or a hook. A lot of times with the PBL experience as we use it, sometimes it's just a daily hook. We'll start a new texts that we're sharing together, and in order to hook them in, I just give them a game or a puzzle, and we're sitting at their table, and I'll say, okay guys, our author says there are 3 factors that make up who we are, and they all begin with E. And I need you to see if you can figure out the 3 E's, and you have to back it up, and we'll see who can get it. That's a challenge. In 15, 20 minutes, they're working together, sharing information from the text, we're putting it on the board. Because I've given them the challenge that they all begin with E, that was enough to give them a hook entry point. So that's 15 minutes of a PBL. Sometimes it's a project that will last us maybe 3 or 4 days together. I try to give you concrete examples to just help you picture what it's like. So my job is to kind of set up the experience. I have second semester seniors. That's not an easy group to engage at this particular time. So my challenge is a great one. So what do they care about? They care about college or what's coming next in their lives. So we set up teams, and each team was a different university, and we started, I picked universities that were from different areas of the country, and we did some research on free speech on college campuses and controversial speakers and who should be allowed to come. And they researched the articles, came up with evidence and essential questions, and they're kind of hypothetical, as Josh had set up for you with the bridges. Their hypothetical was they were the student advisory committee for that college, and they had to set the policy for who would be allowed to speak on campus. And as a group, they came up with essential questions to determine the criteria. They did the research on those questions, and then they came up with, they researched their particular college, they researched the background of that college and any speakers who had come in the past. And that was probably a couple of days of them researching, me circulating. What was I doing? I was modeling how to ask good questions, asking them questions to facilitate their next steps. That's really my job, is to check in with each and every table, to monitor, check in, how are you guys doing, where are you in your research, where are you going to go next, to keep them push them forward. And then that list, that policy, was a list of criteria, and then each individual student then takes that criteria, and their final product is a reflection where they write about their individual experiences. They talk about how it felt to be a part of the group, the areas that they were proud of, the areas they would do differently next time, their individual feelings about each policy that was created. And that was an example, as I had mentioned before, when we created the groups, I had given them a pre-survey to kind of measure how they felt about different aspects of free speech. And so they had to decide, well, am I going to group them based on differing opinions, or do I want to have kids that really have similar outlooks and viewpoints together? And I decided I wanted to have the kids with similar outlooks and viewpoints and vision together for this exercise, with the idea that they'd be able to come up with a solid policy that they could defend and feel good about. And then I thought we'd have more of a variety of policies, so when we shared the policies with each other, they could then kind of defend their thinking in a way that was more cohesive. And that was a 4-day project. So that's my role. It's all them, and they're digging and researching on the computer and writing and reading those articles, and I'm just kind of making sure I'm in every group every day, pushing the work forward. And that's, I think, what PBL looks like and how it's changed.
I would add, too, though, and this is to Amy, that in addition to the teacher being a researcher and an inquirer and shifting in that direction, I've seen the value of the work in terms of teachers' professional lives, and maybe the importance of a teacher being inspired and re-engaged. So forcing teachers into newer relationships has been wonderful work. The ownership of the learning, I've seen great growth for teachers. And I think also even across disciplines, and I've seen disciplines that sometimes would have been considered maybe secondary in the canon, right? So if they're not math, English, science, social studies, suddenly the value of those subject areas being boosted, especially if I'm working with the art and the music teacher and we're designing something. So the professional and personal life of teaching and of the teacher, which is critical to the experience of kids, I've seen great development there. And I'm talking about veteran teachers in many cases.
Have you seen any pushback? Have you seen any pushback? Has there been any?
I don't think so. I think there's always the fear of the new. I smile when we put teachers into new relationships. I didn't engage that too much, but I know that wasn't. You had some interesting marriages and you had some that were stormier. But at the end, the final products that emerged and the conversations seemed really, really healthy. And I think that model for the kids, in terms of your earlier anxiety, I mean, when the children see the teachers working, collaborating across, when they see the PE teacher working with the math teacher and maybe the science teacher, that's a signal, right? It's a critical signal. So I think there's huge implicit values in the work we're doing for kids.
And I think there's a lot of professional development that's coming our way, but I think that what we said before, there's a lot of turnkey. If I've had a successful project, I work so closely with my teammates that I can say, wow, this works so well. Here's what I did. Let me send you my presentation. Have at it. Change it, make it, revamp it, revise it, make it yours. Send it back to me. But I think that there is a lot of that happening. It's we get a professional development opportunity. I bring it back. I absorb it my way. I teach my class. I realize, oh, that worked. That didn't work. I sit at the lunch table with my friends and say, this was so much fun. Here's what I did. This was successful. And then they dip their toe in or they jump in first. But I think that there's a lot of turnkey happening. And I can speak to the elementary levels, but I imagine it's happening in school.
It's a great segue to the next question, which is about staff development that you mentioned earlier. What has the staff development plan been for teachers and what's currently going on?
So, I could talk for a very long time about this, but I'll just, quick summary of it. Things I think are important to highlight is the piece about opportunity and then a piece also about the structures and how it's facilitated. So in terms of opportunity, we have a wide variety of professional development opportunities that teachers are currently engaged in. We have a number of fellowships throughout the districts where teachers are studying something with a group of people together for 2 years in a 2-year cohort. So it really helps to build these kind of interdisciplinary relationships across the district, K-12 relationships that might not otherwise have happened, allowing people time.
How many people?
We have a number of fellowships. All of the fellowships all together.
Right now we're
35.
No.
What do you think about all the fellowships?
over time, it's been 61 people who have been part of just fellowships.
A little smaller in some groups this year. They vary by group. So we have an advanced technology fellowship. We have the accessible instruction teachers fellowship. Together that's 15. We have TARP, that's 5 this year. That's at the end of the year. iFellows this year is 9.
So it's like 10% of the staff.
Yeah, at any one time, but like TARP, for example, this is the 10th year.
What's TARP?
So Teacher Action Research Project. So we've had many, many teachers that have been. So if you think about all the teachers that have experienced the fellowships, it's probably like 60 or 70.
Yeah, 61 in fellowships, not necessarily including you. So probably closer to, there's some overlap. Yeah, and there's some overlap in those.
But out of 600 teachers roughly, right? 400. Is it 400? 400. Okay, 400.
So there's these 2-year cohorts that exist, and teachers are studying, common interests, or they're studying a process like action research, and they're following their own paths. But then we also have learning teams that are either designed by teachers, a group of teachers say, we want to study this together. They propose the idea, and then they study it for a period of time, a semester or a year. And then some are district facilitated learning teams. So for the L building, we have the L building group right now, which has 40 people in it at the high school. So it's like, it ranges in scale and scope. We also have in-service courses, which Sarah and I were just talking before. We've been playing around with in-service courses that are in person, some that are blended, some in person, some online, and also some in-service courses. We're running a PBL in-service this past few months that was all we're playing around with some of those systems. In addition, and Martin can speak to this too, administration has done a lot of work at faculty meetings, either with department chairs or with whole staffs. I think in every single one of the buildings, the staff have been engaged in work around PBL or around this kind of UDL at the whole staff level in the monthly staff meetings, department meetings. What I wanted to highlight in terms of the structure and the facilitation piece is we really tried to mirror and model in all the professional learning experiences the kind of learning we're trying to engage students in the classrooms. So the staff developers, the administrators, the lead teachers are really trying to act more as facilitators and coaches in these environments instead of as someone with all of the knowledge kind of disseminating information to a group of people. And in that way, I think we've really been able to model practice with teachers, model collaboration, model different ways to give feedback, model how to change a plan in the middle of a cohort or in the middle of a meeting because the group needs something particularly special at that moment. And I think our role as staff developers becomes very much informed by the kind of roles we want our teachers to take on, so that this community of learners is for adults and young people as well. And we're constantly trying to also be responsive to what teachers are asking for. We want to learn more about blank, and so how can we set up a structure or a team or a group to address that need? So multifaceted, but I guess that's my short answer.
And in addition to that scale question, right, you said how many teachers. So when you do what Jessica did, which is to push it out into the schools, you're closer to 90, 95, 100%. We've all done work at different buildings. But I would also say that with this, you're kind of seeing the natural evolution of what we've done over years. It's not like suddenly we're talking about feedback. It's not like suddenly we're talking about accountable talk. It's not like suddenly we're talking about differentiation and all that. What PBL does, it's a sort of a summative bringing together of work we've done over years. And so the experiences aren't so new. The context is a little different. But I think the development, I felt the capacity of the staff at Bell, they were ready for this. We just had to kind of shift their thinking into a new environment. But it was familiar territory.
If I could just add one other thing, Martin, that's reminding me too about some of the staff development we planned in different buildings, is to have the staff development happen in some of these new spaces. And so that the adults can experience flexible space, flexible furniture, ownership of moving things around to meet group needs. So we really, as the new spaces come on board, even though we have been doing this for a long time, we're trying to practice some of it in the new spaces with the adults.
The last question we have for the panel is there anything that parents can do at home to get students ready for this type of instruction?
I'll jump in. I think asking your students questions and encouraging them to ask their own and not giving them the answer, right? Because giving them opportunities to figure things out, to struggle a little bit, to learn. I know Dawn will eyes a bit. To struggle a little bit and to say, but you know how to do this, right? And I think that's the lovely thing about PBL is that I'm not giving students the right to answer to anything. I'm going to guide them in a way that's going to point them in a direction for them to acquire their own understanding of what they believe is the right. Obviously, there's right and wrong with some things, but I'm going to guide them there. I'm not giving it to them. So asking your students questions, letting them problem solve, letting them struggle a little bit, helping them with some organizational things. So if we're going to bake cupcakes tomorrow, what are the things that we need to get at the store today, right? And so helping them build those executive functioning skills that I know that we're concerned about in some of our students with learning difficulties, but providing those structures and scaffolds, because that's what we're doing here in school. It might not be about baking cupcakes, it might be about packing your school bag, but that's what we're doing, and we're not telling them how to pack their school bag. We're saying, what do you need? What would be helpful to you?
I just think, again, these are little guys, just say, great question. mean, that's just a very simple 2-minute PBL. And they might not have any idea, and so you might help guide them towards an answer. And you might ultimately know that there is a correct answer. The train leaves at 10:02. But, you know, it's just that beginning of, great question, what do you think? And that's just a very easy way to just get the kids thinking.
And we had the author, Warren Berger, I had to look him up, I couldn't remember. Warren Berger was here back in the fall, and he wrote the book, A More Beautiful Question. So a little tactic that I took from there, I used it with my own fella, and it started to take hold, is to say, did you ask any good questions today? And that was like a real paradigm shift, to use that old one with my son. He couldn't understand that one. Now he's starting to understand. Sadly, he tells me it isn't that. But I thought that was really, I hadn't thought about that. And I just thought that was one of those simple moves that might be profound at some point. I don't know. In terms of tactics,
Sure. Mine's a little different. Just looking at the students this weekend, watching how they present themselves and their communication skills, made me wonder what we do in our district. And Ellen, you mentioned that there's a presentation and communications area being built in Bell. And of course, by the magic of Google, I find that one article saying how important presentation skills are in PBL learning and in college readiness, which is all we think about at the high school level. So I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit. Is it something?
It's so funny because Mary Ford and I were just meeting with an English teacher here at Seven Bridges today, and he was talking about this exact thing. And so the students in a couple days have to do their big presentation of their project that they've been working on. But he realized that I need to teach them how to present. And how do you learn how to present? You watch other presenters. So they've been studying TED Talks. And they've been critiquing, what did this presenter do? What skills and strategies did this presenter do in his TED Talk to engage the audience, to keep you captivated, to keep you excited, to have you think deeper? And the students studied these video clips of TED Talk, full TED Talks, to really learn about what do presenters do when they're sharing information. And so that was really fascinating to me. So you have teachers that are thinking out of the box, thinking about multimedia sources, thinking about how do I teach these skills, these presentation skills, right? They're not like academic skills. It's not about history. It's not about math. It's about how do I present myself as a person. And that's explicitly being taught in our classrooms. And it's just coincidental that you asked that question. We just had that conversation. And this teacher was so jazzed about it. He was so excited about all the things. I mean, and one of the things that the students brought up was that one of the presenters said really corny jokes, but he called them corny teacher jokes. Which I was like, what do you mean? We don't call corny teacher jokes. We did. But that was one of the things that the students picked out. You know, he used corny teacher jokes in his presentation to keep his audience engaged. So these are the dialogues that kids are having in our classrooms.
And I think just to add on to that a little bit, you'll see a lot of that in English classrooms where you probably expect it most. But I think one opportunity that this presents is that those skills are present in another classroom. When you do this kind of work, it's interdisciplinary. So you're thinking about what you've learned in your English classroom and bringing it into your science presentation or your social studies presentation. So it's that interdisciplinary piece. And I think it's creating more and more opportunity for conversations across departments and disciplines that are really helpful. So now you're applying it to a context.
And I think when you imagine this going K-12, right, and we're still in the beginning, but that progression of presentation, like we've seen with many other initiatives, so now the kids arrive to the middle school having had 4 or 5 years of an experience, and then they go on to the high school. And I'm sure we're going to get strong enough to start identifying presentation skill and what's the way to make that into a product. That takes time, right? And there's a progression with all that. And because you're correct, it will be critical skill for the kids to leave high school with, which you'd invest 12 years in this. That will be embedded in the experience.
Are you thinking about how students' IEP goals might change over time? And can you give me some examples of that?
For sure. I mean, at the elementary level, you're always going, but we need to teach our kids how to read, right? So students that need those skills as, those, I can't foresee that changing, right? But can I see on an IEP more of this like, more skill-based goals? Absolutely. And maybe it's less about, can add numbers 1 through 10, but can communicate with a partner, right? So I think that, our students with special needs, we have an obligation. It is my main focus to make sure that they're academically successful.
Do you have any materials that our parents can use to sort of help to think about it? Because I think a lot of the times the goal development happens in a team, and the parents are a critical component, and I'd like to get them sort of in that right mindset.
Yeah.
So if you come across, you don't have to answer it now, but if you come across any materials that I can share with them.
I will pass it along, for sure.
Thinking about some of the
And
collaboration skills, the dispositional skills,
Yeah.
and things that, in addition to the academic pieces that we think of more traditionally, I think would be really helpful in this setting. Did you want to add something, Josh?
No, I think I just wanted to.
Right. Yes, we are.
But I do want to say that this is the continuation of our learning as a community around PBL, around STEAM, and around space. This is by nowhere means going to be the last parent university around this. So as we open our new spaces, as we start developing new curriculum, as we start doing more professional development around new ways of learning, we will continue to have these parent universities. And thank you all for coming, and thank you all for being participants, and thank you all for struggling with the bridge building activity and asking really thoughtful questions.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you guys for your